Hey there everybody, welcome to Tucktuk's Trinkets and Terrain. For this week's video, I decided to show you how I built some baseless water features. I made this small pond just as like a proof of concept sort of thing, but the idea here is that instead of basing it on some like foam or cardboard or whatever, it's just the water itself. So you can plop this down on sort of your stone or grass or wherever you need it to be, and just sort of make it as modular as possible. This is not my original idea. I actually first saw this, I'm pretty sure, on Reddit. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the original creator. If you happen to know who it is, please let me know so I can give them some credit in the description below. But I'm gonna show you what I did and how I did it, and I hope you enjoy. To get things started, you're just gonna need some sort of non-stick surface. So I'm just gonna use some wax paper here. I'm gonna lay out a couple of sheets and then use some tape to create a seal just in case some of the water leaks down the road. I don't want it getting all over my table. And then I'm going to flip it over since the tape itself is not non-stick, and apparently clear away all the little bits that were left over on my table here. Get a nice clean surface to start the project on. Now for the exterior, the sort of the border, you're going to want to use basically whatever you want sort of the ground texture to be. I'm just going to use what I normally use for dirt flocking, just this mix of different size pebbles and sand. You can use something like clay or sculpt mold, something like that, but I like to use the sand here because it's very easy to fix mistakes and modify it once the project goes along. If you use something like clay, it hardens eventually and then you're stuck with whatever you have. I make this relatively high to create a well for the water to be poured into. And then I do a very thin layer along the edges to create sort of a gradient. As you're getting shallower, you can see more and more dirt kind of thing. And then from here, it's just a matter of adding details and sort of decorating it. So you can use basically whatever you want. So I've got some clump foliage, a few sticks. These are some tea leaves with a little bit of brown paint to make like a mulch looking texture. Really whatever you want to use here. This is also where you can make your water feature as specific or generic as you want. If you want to do like an underground one, you can add mushrooms and make it really algae heavy, things like that. I am just using some sort of generic leaf litter and foliage. A little bit of static grass to add some color. This part is pretty freeform, so just do whatever suits you basically. I also grabbed some plastic plants and some little trees here that we will use after we've poured the liquid here. So this is what I like to use for water, this 2-part casting resin. And I've just mixed up 2 different batches and I've colored them sort of a dark green, one lighter, one darker. And by pouring the darker one in the middle, we can create sort of a illusion of depth to our little pond here. I have used alcohol inks to dye this, but you can use acrylic craft paint as a cheap option. You do need to be careful with how much craft paint you mix into resin, specifically as adding water to the resin can create a weird reaction once it cures. But obviously, whatever water material you're using, use whatever color works for you. So I've poured the darker color in the middle here, and then I've got my lighter color. I'm going to start going around all of the edges, making sure to cover all of our details and get all the way up to the sand itself. Now the sand is high enough and thick enough that the resin will seep into it and essentially cement a layer around the glue here, but I have done this once before this video, so I knew that this was going to be fine in terms of keeping the resin in one place. And when you're pouring this, you want to make sure that you surround everything that you want to stay in the piece, using your water feature as basically the glue that holds everything together. So you can see here I've got sort of a blank spot where I didn't pour enough resin in, but because I used the sand, I can just push it in and fix that little issue. As far as how much water material you're going to want to use, it's kind of just going to be a guessing game, to be totally honest with you. I ended up mixing not quite enough, so it was a bit of a stretch to make this specific pond work, but it's just going to be a guessing game. If you make too much, You can always make like a smaller piece at the same time. Once I've got all my resin poured, I just use a popsicle stick and sort of blend the darker and the lighter colors together to make more of a gradient, smoother transition between the shallower area and the deeper area here. And then with all my resin poured, I'm going to grab those plastic plants and little trees and stick them in as some plants growing out of the edges of my pond here. Add a little bit of verticality as well as some, nice green pops of color. And you can do this as little or as much as you want. I tend to go a little sparse with my vegetation so that I can fit it into more terrain types rather than it being, a heavy forested pond, something like that. And then one last little detail, I just sprinkled some leaf litter over the top, like it's resting on top of the water. Now after 24 hours, this is fully cured. You can see the two different color resins have sort of bled away. I think my workbench is not level, unfortunately, but still looks good. And then after pouring away all of my excess sand, this is what we end up with. And this could be called 100% done here. It's all one piece, nice and solid. I can just drop this on the table and it'd be called good. But I wanted to make my sand barrier a little darker, closer to like a mud. So I just did a super lazy brown wash over everything and called the paint job good. But for one last step, to add some ripples to the top of our water here, I've grabbed some glossy Mod Podge and I'm just using a paintbrush to add some ridges and ripples around all the edges of the pond here. Now I'm not very good at this, in all honesty, so I just kind of stab at it with a bristle brush, and it looks good enough to me. Obviously you can do as much or as little as you want, so this isn't exactly accurate to what would be portrayed in an actual swamp, but it's good enough for me. So here is the pond in some little setups just to show that I can drop it into basically anything I want. I have made one other large river piece using this same method that I'll show at the end here. So it does scale up quite nicely. And like I said, this is super flexible. You can detail these as much or as little as you want. Make these as specific or as vague as you want in terms of terrain or habitat types. Thanks so much for watching the video. I really like this project. It's super nice and easy. I think all in all it took me like 30 minutes, excluding dry time, to make the little pond here. I do have an Instagram account where you can check out in-progress pictures and other things that I've got going on. And if you want to pick up dungeon tiles and terrain accessories for your tabletop games, I do have an Etsy shop. Both of those links can be found in the description below. But more than anything, thank you so much for stopping by. I'll see you next time.